The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the David Pakman Show, reminding you we're streaming live every Monday through Thursday on YouTube. Just go to the David Pakman Show YouTube channel. Every Monday through Thursday, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific. You can watch live. There's a chat room. It's a great thing, Lewis. We're trying to build up this live stream.
Yeah, so far so good.
Very good. Let's get right into the Mitt Romney clips. They're so outrageous today that I want to get them out of the way early and then move on to other things. From the 60 Minutes interview from 48 hours ago, Mitt Romney said it is fair for him to pay lower taxes than the middle class. Here's the clip of him telling that to Scott Pelley.
No tax on their savings.
Right. Let's see if we can get back to that clip here as we do, because this is really a key clip. Okay, Lewis, let's take a look at that. Why don't we?
No tax on their savings.
Now, you made on your investments personally about $20 million last year, and you paid 14% in federal taxes. That's the capital gains rate. Is that fair to the guy who makes $50,000 and paid a higher rate than you did?
It is a low rate, and one of the reasons why the capital gains tax rate is lower is because capital has already been taxed once at the corporate level, as high as 35%.
So you think it is fair?
Yeah, I think it's the right way to encourage economic growth, to get people to invest, to start businesses.
Okay, so as we know, this is not the case. This is Mitt Romney nonsense. A couple of things on this. Number one, if you actually look at that 2011 tax return, even to get up to that 14%, Mitt Romney overpaid his taxes. You can bet that he has already filed an amended tax return, and he's going to get a lot of that money back because he actually overpaid in order to even get up to that 14%. That's not really being reported very much, Lewis.
And I wouldn't expect it to.
Right, absolutely.
Well, it seems like it would be good to report that for him. He could say he was so patriotic that he decided to pay above and beyond what was required of him.
I'm glad Natan said that, because he has many times gone on the record and said he pays every dollar that is required of him and not a penny more, that we wouldn't want a president to pay more taxes than that which is required. Well, it turns out that Mitt Romney did, for political reasons, to make his effective tax rate appear higher. Let's put that aside. We know that this lower taxes on the rich stuff does not spur economic growth. Growth and people investing in businesses is going to be spurred by demand. There's not going to be demand unless the middle class has the money to buy the product or service that you're selling. So that idea goes out the window. So this is really, it's incredible that Mitt Romney is still parroting this stuff. Now, as Paul Krugman wrote, the low rates didn't happen until 2003. In fact, long-term capital gains rates were 30% from 86 to 97 when Clinton cut a deal. This makes it clear that we had great economic growth even with much higher capital gains rates. No big deal.
Yeah, it's but I mean, Mitt Romney has to come up with a way to make it sound like, I don't know. Well, I mean, I love how he throws in the corporate tax.
Of course.
But
it's already been double taxed. Well, by that logic, everything's been double taxed, right?
Right.
The money I just spent today on something was already money that I pay taxes on, was already money that whoever bought a membership, for example, to support the show, that's money they had paid taxes on. I mean, we could work all the way back to when money was first created. It doesn't make any sense.
The tax on his investments obviously only affects him, and he's talking about a corporate tax.
And the other key thing that a lot of people are missing is that we're talking about the taxes on the gains, right? We're talking about taxes on the gains. He's not paying taxes on the initial money, that lump sum. He paid taxes on the money, the lump sum he invested, presumably he paid taxes on that. And then he's paying taxes only on the gains. So this idea that if the tax rate goes up and you keep less money on your gains would make you not invest, that doesn't make any sense.
No.
If you've got $1 million and you're going to make 10% of that, $100,000, if you pay a 15% tax rate, you'll have the $85,000 left. If you pay a 30% tax on that gain, you'll have $70,000 left. In either case, it's gains.
Of pure profit.
It's profit. Why would you'd have to be a bad business person to not invest when the marginal return is still greater than zero. I mean, it's basic economics, ladies and gentlemen. Is Mitt Romney is he mean or is he a liar? That's really the question.
Or does he truly believe that that's the best way to, quote, spur economic growth?
Right. Is he really that incompetent? It's one of three, and none of them are good, ladies and gentlemen. Now, here's another thing. Mitt Romney has long been talking about how he is going to cut tax rates by 20% That, of course, would cost trillions of dollars. It would mean a big tax cut for the rich, but he's maintained he's not going to raise taxes on the middle class. Well, it turns out that that's not the case. The Tax Policy Center, which is kind of considered the gold standard in nonpartisan tax analysis, looked at the tax cut and the promises and says it's just not mathematically possible. Romney doesn't want to touch tax breaks for savings and investment, like, for example, the 15% capital gains rate. He reiterated that on 60 Minutes, as you just saw. There isn't enough money in the remaining tax breaks for people making over $250,000 to pay for their tax cuts. In other words, it just doesn't add up, Lewis.
Right.
So we've looked into this more. A bunch of different economists have looked into this. A Harvard study was done by Martin Feldstein, and it determines what? It says, it is very reasonable to say that people in that high income group, by which he means people making over $100,000, are not in the middle class. Under reality, under realistic assumptions, the math can kind of work. What Romney is proposing might work if you have a big tax increase for people making between $100,000 a year and $250,000 a year in order to pay for that tax cut for those making over $250K. Now, Mitt Romney did say up to $250,000 a year is middle income, didn't he?
Right.
So essentially, in order to make these numbers work, you have to tax people that Mitt Romney says are middle income. Now, I don't know that someone making $235,000 a year is really middle income. The numbers certainly don't support that claim. But if you buy into Romney's claim, he's going to have to raise taxes on those people.
Right. But does he, does he plan to do that? Does he really put them in the same category?
As who?
As middle income.
He claimed to with George Stephanopoulos.
But is that what his tax plan, his tax policy is going to reflect?
It's one of these questions, Natan, where we have to say, is Mitt Romney stupid or is he a liar? Because there's really not other possibilities.
Yeah, there's like a few issues. One is just the fact that this whole economic argument, the general lowering taxes for everybody stimulates economic growth, has been totally discredited.
Completely.
But then separately from that, it's the hypocrisy of flip-flopping, of just saying that you're going to do something and it's clear the math isn't going to add up.
It's twofold nonsense.
I'm not going to assume that someone who gets as far as he is stupid. It's only safe to assume that he's not really telling the truth.
It's more likely that if you're a successful politician, you're a liar rather than being stupid.
And at the same time, I look back at President Bush, who I don't think is a very smart guy, and he became president. So, I don't know.
Speaking of President Bush, Mitt Romney had two comments in the last 24 hours, or recently, that are likening him, making us really think, is he as incompetent as George W. Bush? Here's the first one. Mitt Romney doesn't understand why you can't roll down the windows on a plane. He had Ann Romney's plane recently was grounded because the main cabin filled with smoke. It was a small electrical fire, no injuries. It did, however, make Mitt Romney completely forget all of the dangers of altitude. He said, listen, when you have a fire in an aircraft, there's no place to go exactly. And you can't find any oxygen from outside the aircraft to get in the aircraft because the windows don't open. I don't know why they don't do that. It's a real problem.
Is this a joke?
No, this is
Is there
for real.
any way this was taken out of context?
I've read the comments a number of times. The LA Times is reporting on this extensively. It just doesn't make any sense. Aircrafts, of course, don't open the windows because the cabins are pressurized to fly safely at high altitudes. If you open a window, it would sicken the passengers, the crew. You could have the suction effect. It's kind of obvious why the windows don't roll down on an airplane. I think that Mitt Romney should investigate this further, though. Rather than his bizarre tax plans, work on roll down windows on airplanes. That might be better.
Perhaps his next big capital venture will be a new airline where the windows roll down, or a new airline manufacturer.
Honestly, though, aren't we, Natan, getting slightly into George W. Bush territory with this type of thing?
Yeah, I think we might be. But on the bright side for Romney, he's going to have a lot of free time after the election, so he can spend it learning all of the ins and outs of science.
Yeah, he can look into aviation.
Between the brown face and this, it's getting pretty bad, but I don't think we've reached George W. yet.
Well, can I take it up a notch for you?
Please.
Here's another one. Mitt Romney is kind of tacitly praising Hitler for his alternative energy ideas. Now, I know what the criticism I'm going to get, that I'm implying that Mitt Romney likes Adolf Hitler or thinks that killing Jews is good. I'm not implying that. All I'm saying is it's generally a bad idea for a presidential candidate to look back at anything Hitler did and say, we should be looking into that. Okay, now here's what he had to say about Hitler and his liquefied coal energy ideas. Okay, here we go.
Nuclear power, cellulosic ethanol, liquefied coal. Gosh, Hitler during the Second World War, I guess, because he was concerned about losing his oil, liquefied coal. That technology is still there. I'm told the Chinese are building 5 liquefied coal plants now. They'll be...
So let's go around and see what you guys think. I mean, I'm not making this seem like Mitt Romney is an anti-Semite. All I'm saying is, if you're running for president of the U.S., have the presence of mind to know that when you're talking about possibilities for alternative energy, don't mention one that Hitler came up with. That's what I'm saying. It's a little silly.
He also mentions the Chinese. Why not just leave it at the Chinese?
But wait a second. The last thing Mitt Romney should be mentioning is anything, because the question is, really, Mitt, did you make money through Bain Capital off of the Chinese doing that?
Yeah.
That's you don't want to mention Hitler or the Chinese.
We know Mitt loves China.
Right.
I'm not saying he loves Hitler, but he definitely loves China. Yeah, don't reference Hitler, and don't say you want to do anything that Hitler did. At the same time, no. Let's distance ourselves from coal. Coal is not the answer.
Oh, you're actually looking at the substance of what he's saying.
Well, I mean, I have to throw that in there.
Natan, I mean, I'm not saying Romney endorsed Mein Kampf. I'm just saying this is probably not a good idea. It's a little stupid.
Yeah, I don't understand how his campaign doesn't prevent these things from happening. Like, there should just be like I mean, honestly, it's just common sense. But if it's not common sense, there should be like a little booklet that says the things that you can't do. One of them is to name drop Hitler in passing.
Yeah, don't recall. There aren't many presidential candidates who would go up there on any stage and recall Hitler when you're looking for ideas about stuff to do.
I've got it. The campaign has to make sure that anytime Mitt appears on TV, there's at least a 7-second delay.
Right.
And a staffer can just hit a bleep button.
Yeah. Here's the real question for those who say this is no big deal. Would Romney talk about Hitler's liquefied coal speaking at a Jewish Federation senior center in Florida? No, he wouldn't.
Probably not.
I think that's the obvious
I really
answer.
doubt it.
No question about it. Lewis hosts and produces the bonus show. Today we'll talk about New York City schools giving out morning after pills without parental knowledge, but not without consent. It's an interesting story. We'll also talk about should housewives earn a salary paid for by the husband. Really interesting story out of India. DavidPakman.com/membership. Get the bonus show. We'll talk to you after this break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Today's new David Pakman Show member of the day is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. The more you look for it, the more you find it. Find Liberal Bias at liberalbias.com. Nicholas Duran. Nicholas Duran is our new David Pakman Show member of the day. I don't know if he goes by Nick, so I don't want to, every Nicholas I know personally does go by Nick, but I feel like it would be a little bit presumptuous to just start nicknaming members, don't you think?
Yeah, you can't just abbreviate and shorten names at will. You never know who you might offend.
You know what's really funny? Every time someone talks about a nickname, or the name Nick, actually, interesting. I remember this substitute teacher that we had in, I don't remember if it was my middle school or my high school. It was a very odd guy who would never teach the material. He would always just talk about life and different things. And when he would, once I remember a girl saying, well, my nickname is such. And he says, no, 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 in a very dramatic way. I don't like nicknames. You know why? What's a nick? It's like a little, something's nicked. It's a flaw. Nicknames are flaws. You go by your regular name. No idea what it was out of. But every time there's a discussion of nicknames, I think back to that very bizarre 50-minute class I had when I was 14 or 15 years old.
Quite strange.
It was very odd. Yeah. I know you know the guy I'm talking about, by the way.
You'll have to remind me after. Yeah.
In any case, hey, this is really funny. The NFL is having a really big problem because of the lockout of its union referees, where there's just blown call after blown call, and just disasters are happening constantly. And Scott Walker, Republican governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker, who is the union buster at large, is now demanding the return of those unionized NFL referees because the replacement referees are really negatively affecting the Green Bay Packers, which he really likes. Isn't this ironic?
It's kind of funny. I mean, it could be argued that because of unions, these refs it's the unions that allow these refs to do this lockout and to go on strike when they do and those sorts of things. But yeah, you'd think he would offer an alternative to union employees.
Governor Walker tweeted out on his @GovWalker Twitter account, after catching a few hours of sleep, the Packers game is still just as painful. Return the real refs. What happened? I mean, I'm hearing that this weekend there was just disaster after disaster.
Yeah, well, in the Packers game, which happened last night, I guess there was a last-minute Hail Mary pass by Seattle.
Also known as a Fail Mary.
Right. And it was very clear that the pass was intercepted in the end zone by a Green Bay Packer.
Right.
One of the receivers from Seattle just kind of had his hand on the ball in a weird way, and the refs called it a touchdown. Then they reviewed it, and it stuck.
Right.
But it was very clear that it was intercepted.
What was the commentary on air when the call was made?
I mean, John Gruden, I guess, was like, this is unbelievable. Like, what is going on? Like, they called it comical.
Right.
The commentators were basically making fun of the refs and saying that this was a disaster.
What other big ones have there been?
Also this weekend, in the Cowboys game, Romo goes back to throw. He's looking for a certain guy in the end zone. The guy kind of slips and obviously doesn't get thrown to because of that. Turns out the ref threw his hat into the end zone. Now, normally you're just supposed to throw it along the sideline to signify when someone goes out of bounds. He throws it into the end zone. The receiver falls on the hat, okay? And because of that, possibly missed a touchdown.
Right.
Like, I mean, he might have, it's a very good chance he might have been thrown to and had a touchdown.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
And all sorts of just terrible calls, confusion. It's a disaster.
So long story short, union busting is okay for Scott Walker as long as his Packers don't lose. It's funny because a lot of Packers players actually urged Wisconsinites to vote against Scott Walker in the recall, which is also pretty funny. Just an incredible situation with the NFL refs and also with Scott Walker.
Yeah, nuts.
Typical of Republicans. You're against stuff except when it helps you personally.
Right.
A Republican judge has denied a transgender name change on biblical grounds. This is an odd story. On August 30th, James Dean Ingram went before Judge Bill Graves to request that her name be legally changed to Angela Renee Ingram. Angela's planning to undergo gender reassignment surgery. The request was denied on what is really the flimsiest and most insulting of reasoning, which is that Judge Graves quoted the Bible as his authority. This is via News OK. It is notable that Genesis 1:27 and 28 states, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female he created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth." The DNA code shows God meant for them to stay male and female. This is incredible, number one, because it's yet another disgusting right-wing conservative violation of the separation of church and state, but also because the DNA code that God created shows all kinds of things like bad eyesight, congenital heart conditions, predispositions to cancer, infertility, dwarfism. We have medical procedures to remedy every single one of those. According to Graves' biblical interpretation of the law, all of those should be illegal too.
Let's also discuss that a human can be born with both male and female genitalia.
Right, of course.
I wouldn't expect this ignorant ass to know that, but
He pretends to be a, quote, constitutional conservative, but like many of these constitutional conservative Republicans, he is reinterpreting history to match his personal prejudices, and in this particular way, it's very, very offensive. If
there's any justice in this country, this will result in disbarment immediately.
I think that the judge, the person involved, rather, should have a lawyer bring this to an appeals court. The judge is so clearly biased and unable to apply civil law impartially. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, the judge is supposed to apply civil law, and he's quoting the Bible. There is no greater violation than the separation of church and state, than quoting the Bible as the reasoning for your decision for a civil law matter. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. What happened to the Constitution?
Well, that's much like union busting and Scott Walker with the NFL refs. They only care about the Constitution when it doesn't go away their personally held social conservatism.
Right. You got to go with whatever you can use to further your agenda.
Speaking of anti-gay bigotry, mega pastor Joel Osteen, who absolutely gives me the creeps, he was on CNN and he told Soledad O'Brien, listen, gays and lesbians aren't God's best.
Well, it's just that's an interesting way to say it, because you're at least admitting that they're children of God.
That's right. Yeah, God at least did create those people. Let's take a listen to what he had to say. This is quite shocking. Here we go.
Something about just speaking to, the seeds of greatness that God's placed in all of us.
So then let me ask you a question, because when you came on Piers Morgan's show a while ago, he asked you about homosexuality, Christianity, homosexuality, and almost every time we have a pastor on, it's a conversation we have. Yeah. And you are known for these uplifting ceremony services, and you talk to a lot of, it's like 45,000 people who attend. And I always wonder, when you say homosexuality is a sin, and there's a bunch of people who clearly are gay who are in your church, you're calling them sinners. I mean, that...
Well, so that
it's the opposite of uplifting, I would think.
It does, but one, I don't necessarily focus on that. I only talk about that on the interviews. The other thing, too, is it seems like in Christianity, sometimes we categorize sin. I mean, pride is a sin. Being critical is a sin. Being negative is a sin. The Scripture even says anything that is not of faith is a sin.
We're all sinners? You'd say we're all sinners?
Yes, and so I think we say, okay...
homosexuality is not so bad, right?
Well, I don't think it's God's best. Neither do I think,
no one is God's best,
no,
right?
We're all growing.
I mean, so don't you think, though, that with the country struggling with increasing acceptance of all its citizens, and you're for basic fairness for everybody, that in situations where, like, we're trying to pass these marriage equality bills in certain states now, that you have an important voice to lend to that, especially to kids who are maybe worried about who they are and where they fit in the community?
Great question.
Well, I think I have an important voice, but I think I've been good. I think part of my, if you want to call it success, is I've stayed in my lane, and my lane is lifting people's spirits, and there are issues.
Well, believe me, there's nothing that would lift people's spirits more than young gay children hearing something positive, specifically positive, from Christian pastors like Joel Osteen, than hearing negativity on CNN and as he calls it, silence, or just not discussing it in his church. Despicable.
Pretty ridiculous, but at least it sounds like he almost believes that God did make them that way.
God made gay and lesbian people. It's just not his best work. Also, who isn't God's brightest anti-gay bigots? It's not, God made anti-gay bigots, but they're not his brightest creations, understandably.
No. We are not equals, I guess.
I like it also how he says, I'm not for gay marriage, but I'm not for discriminating against people either. Well, that's discrimination. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It just, these basic tenets just seem completely lost on him. By the way, how does this guy pack a church with 40,000 people, most of whom give him money? That's really the concerning thing about America.
Maybe he's got roller skating bears during his sermon.
I don't know what he's got, but that's really the concern, isn't it, Natan, that a guy like this has 40,000 people listening to him weekly and giving him money for that?
Yeah, it's funny. Like, he has this smirk on his face when he talks, and it almost seems, I'm just reading into it, I don't even know this guy, but it almost seems like he doesn't even buy what he's saying. He's just kind of doing it because he needs to, because maybe some higher authority in his in the church hierarchy would fire him or something.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, I think he's basically the guy in charge there. The other thing, which I am forgetting, I'm not playing it, but someone on the live stream just reminded us of, there's another part in this interview where he says, listen, I was born straight, but people aren't born gay. So in other words, I guess he's subscribing to the everyone's born straight and some people choose to be gay, which, as we know, is complete nonsense and has been widely debunked. But that's as far as we're getting with Joel Osteen, I guess.
Not surprising.
You got to be careful with this guy. Stay away. Stay far, far away.
Yeah, right. This guy's probably making millions of dollars a year.
Oh, he is. It's not probably. It's widely known.
Yeah.
Facebook.com/David Pakman Show. We are heading towards 10,000 Facebook likes. Please like us on Facebook. Facebook.com/David Pakman Show. We'll take a break. We'll be back after this. We'll talk to David Bernstein about this key Senate race, Elizabeth Warren and Scott Brown, and a lot of other stuff I want to tell you about. So stay tuned.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
David Bernstein's a political reporter for The Phoenix in Boston. We're going to talk about the Senate race between incumbent Republican Senator Scott Brown. The challenger is Elizabeth Warren, who was here in studio with us just a couple of months ago. David, thanks for joining us. Let's start with the latest polls. I'm reading a whole bunch of different stuff about what is going on in the polls. What's the consensus?
Well, there were several polls that showed Elizabeth Warren has moved ahead by a few points, but there was also one that showed it even and one that showed Scott Brown ahead by a few points. Most people that I talked to, with the campaigns or as close to the campaigns, they really believe that it's about even 45-45 with a sliver of 10% who could go either way, and that's where the battle's going to be.
How do these polls compare to the polls when it was Martha Coakley running against Scott Brown around the same amount of time, about 45 minutes before the election?
Coakley was showing,
days, that is.
Yes, Coakley was showing much better at this stage. We weren't getting as many polls, certainly public polls. It was a special election happening at an odd time, and nobody really thought. The national groups didn't really think that there was much at play here, so there wasn't as much polling being done. But certainly the internal polls and what few polls there were on the race showed her at a much better level at this point. But Scott Brown is the incumbent; he's popular, and he starts off in a strong position, and really has been in front by a small amount through most of the summer. And this is really showing Elizabeth Warren has caught up.
Yeah, so like you said, that was a special election. Do you have a sense of how this Senate election taking place on the same ballot as the presidential election, one where there is an incumbent Democratic president, what effect might that have on this Senate election?
It's a huge difference, and it really is enough. Scott Brown won by about 5 points, more or less, in that special election, and the Democratic Party here calculates out that just the change in the turnout alone more than makes up for that 5-6 point advantage from that past race. You just get a completely different turnout for a presidential election with Barack Obama on the top of the ticket than you had for the Senate election that took place in the middle of the winter at an odd time. So that's a huge advantage for the Democrats. But of course, Scott Brown makes up for that by having been in office and for publicity, name recognition, and popularity. So that sort of evens it out.
What about how this particular Senate race could affect the balance of the Senate going into the next session?
Well, this is the big thing: is that a lot of people are pointing to this race as potentially the one that could tip the Senate one way or the other. It's going to be quite close. It's currently 52-48 Democrats, but Republicans have some good opportunities to gain seats. This is one of the very few opportunities that Democrats have to gain one back, and a lot of people think this could be the tipping point, and that's going to be a big part of Elizabeth Warren's pitch going forward, is for those people who are planning to vote for Barack Obama, who like the idea of Democrats in office. Even if you like Scott Brown personally, it's voting for him means potentially putting Mitch McConnell and other Republicans in charge of the Senate who can't afford it.
Last thing on this, David, the effect of Mitt Romney, former Massachusetts governor, Republican. We talked already about the effect that President Obama being at the top of the ticket may have. What about a former Massachusetts governor who is also a Republican? Can we say anything about what effect that might have on the Senate election?
Well, this is what I would say on this. It certainly hurts in a sense that Romney's going to lose by a very wide margin here in his home state, one of his home states, and that does not help any Republicans below him on the ticket. But I would make this argument that Romney is better for Scott Brown than pretty much any other Republican would have been at the top of that ticket. If you try to imagine a Rick Santorum or Rick Perry or Tim Pawlenty, that would have really alienated northeastern, New England voters. They really would have had it out for the Republican Party and really would have caused a real problem for Scott Brown. Whereas Mitt Romney, people here disliked for personal reasons, because he abandoned the state next year, or condom
wasn't, or whatever their reasons are. It's more personal and Romney doesn't make them angry at the Republican Party the way that those other people will. So it's a matter of particularly if Romney hurts around less than most women's votes.
All right, David Bernstein, political reporter for the Phoenix in Boston. We're going to watch the race. Thanks so much, David.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right, let's take a break. Stay tuned. Plenty more to come after the break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
There was an interesting article in the New York Times the other day about the lifespans actually decreasing for the least educated whites in the United States by up to 4 years, which is pretty incredible. The reasons remain unclear. This is a study by Jay Olshansky, who's a public health professor at the University of Illinois in Chicago. He says that the steepest declines in life expectancy were for white women without a high school diploma who lost 5 years of life between 1990 and 2008, as well as white men lacking a high school diploma losing 3 years of life. Now, life expectancy for blacks and Hispanics of the same education level rose, according to this data. Very, very unusual findings.
Yeah, what are they attributing this to?
There's a couple different theories. There's a couple explanations. It's not totally clear. One is a spike in prescription drug overdoses among young white people, okay? The other is higher rates of smoking among less educated white women, rising obesity in uneducated white communities, a steady increase in the number of people who don't have health insurance and also don't have the education to take even the most basic precautions about their health, best practices to avoid becoming more sick or needing more care that they don't have access to. The latest estimate shows that life expectancy for white women without high school diplomas was 73.5 years, compared with 84 years for white women with a college degree or more. This is almost this is more than 10 years difference. Isn't this incredibly significant?
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm wondering if the data is just, I mean, considering how much culture has changed in that amount of time, I mean, I'm wondering if we can really deduce anything serious from this or use it to predict anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a number of things we can say. The women's health experts specifically are saying that smoking is a big part of the declines because smoking rates have increased significantly among women without high school diplomas, both white and black.
Okay.
And so individually there are a number of factors. What's your reaction to this study, Natan?
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's what you're saying. There are some specific reasons why that particular demographic might have worsened their economic outlooks, or I should say life expectancy. But yeah, I don't know. It seems pretty notable for a first world country.
Well, that's what's incredible, that these changes are dragging down the life expectancy, particularly for women, in the world rankings for the U.S. In 2010, American women fell to 41st, down from 14th in 1985. Being 14th going to 41st is a significant difference in the United Nations rankings for life expectancy. And among developed countries, American women were in the middle in the 70s, last place for life expectancy in 2010. Wow. Shocking.
Yeah.
For people who say we have the best healthcare system in the world, it's becoming very clear it only applies to people who have money.
Not only in education system, I mean healthcare system and education system. Clearly, we're lacking there too.
No question about it. Really weird comments from Madonna. Madonna, and I can't tell whether this is a parody or a joke. I know Madonna's an Obama supporter, but I got some really weird video from Madonna's speech that she gave in between some songs at her second night on her MDNA tour. This was in Washington, D.C. Very weird comments about President Obama being a black Muslim, so on and so forth. Take a listen to this.
Y'all better vote for fucking Obama, okay? For better or for worse, all right? We House. Now that is some shit. That's some amazing shit. It means there is hope in this country. And Obama is fighting for gay rights. Okay? So support the man, goddammit.
Okay, so there's Madonna chiming in about President Obama. I mean, I get she supports Obama, I get it, but what's the black Muslim thing? Is it like a joke, making fun of the birther movement?
It could be. I hope so.
What's your reaction to this, Natan?
It could be a joke, or it could be that she's kind of just referencing his dad's religion, saying, he's just like a Muslim by descent or something. Like, it's not even clear what she means.
It's very weird. Very, very weird. Earlier in September, she thanked President Obama and unveiled a presumably fake back tattoo of Obama's name. I assume it's not a real tattoo.
Probably not.
Yeah, I don't know. Hey, have you heard of Castorium, Lewis?
No.
Castorium, this nerdy Canadian is how she would like to be referenced. Nerdy Canadian told me about this story. Castorium is a euphemism for beaver butt, I guess, is the way we're going to refer to it. It's actually in some ice creams, and it's only labeled as a natural ingredient. Incredibly, it's only required to be called a natural ingredient. You know, when you see that list of other natural ingredients, you may be eating beaver butt, which is incredible because vegetarians might assume that a product that says natural ingredients is not meat, but essentially this is kind of meat, isn't it?
Not really. It looks like, according to this, it's some type of oil or byproduct of a gland in the butt of the beaver.
Right. So then that's not considered. Okay, what if you're vegan?
According to this, both male and female beavers possess a pair of castor sacs and a pair of anal glands located in the two cavities under the skin between the pelvis and the base of the tail. So if you are a vegan, then yes, obviously this is an animal product.
It's also used in some perfumes. It's used as a food additive, as I mentioned. Now, if you think that this is incredibly widespread, we did some research. It looks like the annual consumption is only around 300 pounds. My question is, if it's so inconsequential that there's only 300 pounds of this stuff used, don't you think that there are just alternatives and it's not really necessary to use this stuff?
You would think so. I mean, what, do people have like beaver farms? I mean, how do you get this? I don't get where it comes from.
The other thing is that it's used in small amounts to contribute to the flavor and odor of cigarettes.
Now,
by the way, the same thing that's labeled as only a natural ingredient in food is also in cigarettes. I don't like that.
Interesting that a Canadian sent us this. I mean, I wonder what the consumption rate is in Canada, because Canada has a lot of beavers.
That's true. You know, when I was in Montreal last weekend, I was at the Biodome. The coolest thing was the beavers. They really are incredibly busy. I mean, you think you go to a place where there's animals and they're just kind of hanging around. The beavers were busier than any of the staff at the Biodome. They were chopping up wood with their teeth. Then they were swimming with the wood and storing it in different places. They were sharpening their nails on different other pieces of wood that were there. I mean, it was incredible. The work ethic of these beavers is unbelievable.
Huh, interesting.
I'm considering hiring some as assistant producers, to be completely honest. They're just so busy. They have such a work ethic.
Very productive animals.
It's unbelievable. And I read actually that it's the animal that modifies their environment the most of any animal out there.
Right. So perhaps they would make good interior decorators.
It's very possible.
Or bad ones. I don't know.
I don't really know. They seem to be getting along very, very well. So anyway, Castorium. Know about it. Know about castor sacs. Know about beaver anus and all this stuff, because it may be in your perfume. It may be in your saltwater taffy. I mean, I don't know what foods it's even used in.
Maybe in your cigarettes.
Does this concern you, Natan, when you read about this?
Does it concern me in the sense that it makes me hesitant to eat foods that contain it? Or does it concern me like environmentally and killing beavers and whatnot?
Either, or the fact that it's only labeled as a natural ingredient.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't really bug me that much.
It is considered safe by the FDA, but you know how the FDA is.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess overall I'm just... I'm more concerned with what Lewis brought up, which is, do they have beaver farms? Are beavers being killed? Can you remove the castor sacs and keep the rest of the beaver intact?
Right.
Who knows what's going on?
Yeah, a lot of questions there.
Yeah, it's a strange situation.
All right, let's get to voicemails and then emails as soon as Lewis provides those to me. I'm not completely able to pull those up right now. First, here is a voicemail left at 219-2-DAVID-P, our 24/7 voicemail line. somebody very, very angry with our reporting, an American police officer angry with our story about how little German police officers fired their guns last year. Take a listen.
Hi, David. This is Mike. I'm just calling in reference to your little commentary you made on one of your shows in reference to the 85 bullets being fired by the entire German police force compared to 2 incidents in the United States that amount was surpassed by far.
Right.
Obviously, I looked at the 2 clips that you had and the information. You did about 5 minutes worth of research. I think it's deplorable.
Okay.
Police officer. And I tell you, what you said and what you did is a disgrace to all the law enforcement officers out in this country, because you've never been in a situation like that, and you're making a comparison that you know nothing about. You also got to look at one of your little sideshow buddies there said that he thinks that it's the police that are the problem. Let me explain something to you. If you don't know this, and I know for a fact because my brother-in-law is a police officer in Germany. In fact, he's getting to retire after 40 years of service. There's no such thing as police brutality over there. They don't have issues with the guns because, you know what, there is a little bit a thing called respect, and it goes both ways with law enforcement and the citizens. Go over there and do something an officer tells you.
Let's stop it right there. That's the key thing. It goes both ways between law enforcement and the citizens. So what this gentleman's making 2 points, and I want to address them both. Number one is that because there is no such thing as police brutality in Germany, I guess what he's implying is people are so scared of being hurt by the police that they don't act in ways that would make the police shoot them. I don't know that that's that strong of an argument. But then the other argument is interesting because he says the respect goes both ways. In other words, to me that means there are less shootings both because the police are more respected by citizens and the police respect citizens more. I mean, Natan, is that not what it means to say that the respect goes both ways?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's true that there are other factors. Maybe it's even most of the explanation for why there are so many gun deaths related to cops in the U.S. is because of, you know, the other side of the equation. In other words, the non-cops who are involved. However, how about, you know, the U.K., except for Northern Ireland, where the patrolmen don't even carry guns? I mean, that's something else that we could talk about and why that is, although some people are against that being the case.
Sure.
But there's a range of things going around the world, and we just briefly mentioned the German case.
Yeah, I mean, this police officer is very upset with me and says that everything about what we did was deplorable. You know, we made it very, by the way, if you watch this show regularly, the last accusation that we should the last thing we should be accused of is not being fair and respectful to police officers, given that we've had police officers interviewed on this show, and we always attempt to give the benefit of the doubt and say, we don't want to assume the police officers did something wrong. Here are some concerns we have.
Yeah, it's very clear that the United States has a gun problem, and it doesn't end with just citizens.
The idea that only the citizens are the problem, where do the police officers come from? They're the citizens. So if in Germany, the police officers come from the citizens and that reflects behavior, in the U.S. it's the same thing.
There is a gun problem here, and it goes to the police too. It's everywhere. It's everyone.
Let's talk about some of the emails on the Ann Romney saying, leave Mitt alone. A lot of emails on this. Leave Mitt alone, you are being mean. But when attacking Obama for the color of his skin, his ears, calling him a Muslim terrorist, accusing him of a war on Christianity, he's a Nazi, communist, depicting him as Hitler, portraying him in racist images at rallies, that's not only okay, that's patriotic. Very, very good point.
Yes.
And sometimes I want Romney to be president just to see how quickly people will suddenly get all upset about the half-dozen wars we're fighting for no reason again. Because remember, kids, killing is only bad when Republicans do it. Okay, I don't know what this individual is talking about, but I've not seen liberals all of a sudden think that wars are good because President Obama is the president. I've just not seen that.
No, I think they might be saying whoever's in office is to blame, and people will just be upset immediately again who are now complaining about the wars and blaming it on Obama.
Then another email responding to Ann Romney saying, Ann, I doubt it's that difficult. For Mitt, lying is like breathing. And guess what, Ann? Life is hard. At least when you don't have servants. If you can't take criticism, then maybe you should get out of the ring, you crybaby. Harsh words. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.